This is a presentation that I gave at the ASA Public Equipment Meeting in Oklahoma City in November of 2013, describing some of the work that our lab has done for ASA this past year. We've been involved for the last 2 years in doing field studies for the ASA where we've been measuring the performance, actually the swing speed, of fast-pitch softball players. This video here is describing the tracking that we do for these field studies. You see the bat has markers on it, and that after play we'll go through each of these video clips and track these markers on the bat. From that we get the speed of the bat and also the location of the center of rotation. Those are very important as we're trying to understand the effect of batter ability on bat performance. One of the things we're doing in this field study here in particular is we are changing the weight of the bats. Specifically, we're changing the inertia of the bats. That describes not only how much the bat weighs, but where that weight is. And we're trying to understand how different player abilities affect that swing speed. You may notice in this video here we have an adult male subject who's swinging the bat. We did that just because that's a video clip I had, but all of these field studies involved female subjects. Here you see a image of one of our subjects in the field study, and then here you see the setup that we had. We had a batter here typically on a synthetic background to give us good contrast color with the ball. That would improve our tracking ability, and then we have 2 high-speed cameras that are observing the player, and from that we're able then to get the location of the bat and ball in 3-dimensional space. From that we get not only the location of the ball and bat, but also the speed. This plot or table is a summary of the tests that we did. We actually had 4 separate field studies, 2 in 2012 and then 2 in 2013. Our subjects ranged in age from 9 all the way up to 30. We had one batter who was 30 years old, and this comprised then 92 subjects. You notice here that in some cases these rows don't add up. In some cases we would have 2 subjects in a field study, but one of the subjects may not have been able to swing all of the bats, and so we wouldn't be able to use their data. But our field study ended up with 92 batters. This is a significant number of subjects for a study like this. In comparison, for instance, the first field study that we did for ASA back in 2003, where we developed the first swing speed formula for slow pitch softball, that involved 12 subjects. So we have a very large range here. We did this for a couple of reasons. One, we realized that this is a difficult measure to make, and the more subjects we have, the more confidence we can have on our result. The other is that in fast pitch we have a much larger range in age and player ability than we have in slow pitch. So for both those reasons we decided to increase the size of this field study. So these are the results of the field study. In this plot on the left we're looking at the average player swing speed in miles per hour for 3 age groups. So this might be junior high, high school, and college. And you see a progressively increasing ability of batter swing speed, ranging from about 40 miles an hour up to about 65 miles an hour. Now in comparison, if you were to look at high-level slow pitch softball players, their bat speed would be around 85 miles an hour, which is significantly faster. That's an important difference to observe, or at least remember, because when you talk about the batted ball speed or the speed that you would see of the ball in play, that's highly dependent on the ability of the player in swinging the bat. The plot on the right here is showing the same data, but now we've just broken it down by age. You can see some batters or ages have better ability. We had just one 9-year-old batter, and that batter was actually pretty good for their age. But then on average you see this increasing ability until about age 20. There we seem to find a plateau of their performance, which one would expect as the players stop growing and reach maturity. So this slide is somewhat difficult to understand. Here what we've done is we've looked at the normalized swing speed. So it's difficult in looking at this data trying to look at absolute swing speed, say in miles per hour, because you have player ability that would be biasing your results. So what we've done is we've taken the swing speed of each batter for each bat and divided it by their average swing speed. So if you look at these bats here, this is the group of bats that are 31 inches long. Their average would be 1 right here in the middle. And then similarly for this older group of batters, for 33 and 34 inch bats, their average is 1. So in that way, we can normalize out the effect of player ability. So with these shorter bats, we use that with a younger group of subjects. We had nearly half of our subjects here, 47, swinging these bats, and their inertia then ranged between about 5,000 and 6,500. Where for these longer bats that were between 33 and 34 inches long, their inertia was quite a bit higher, going from a little more than 6,500 up to about 9,000, which is about the average range for a slow pitch bat. What we're interested when we reduce this data is the slope of this line, and that's described by this exponent here. So for the 31 inch bats, it was about 0.17, where for the 34 inch bats, it was about 0.23. This number will change a little bit depending on the subjects, but mostly it depends on the relative size of the bats and the batters. So as this number becomes larger, that means that the batter is more sensitive to the inertia of the bat. And as it becomes smaller, the batter is less sensitive to the inertia of the bat. So in this case, where these younger batters had a lower power, what that meant is that the inertia of the bats was lower than the inertia of their arms relative to the older age. So these differences are important to note as we look forward and we try to develop a formula or a process that would regulate bat performance for this wide range of batters and their different abilities. One of the things I would like to mention here also are these dots for the 34 inch bats that don't have an error bar. Some people will observe these studies and say, well, this really doesn't work very well because the batters are swinging your bats and they're not swinging the bat that they're familiar with. So in this study, we had batters actually bring their own bats to the field study. We measured the inertia of their bats there and had them swing those bats. And these bats had a similar variation in inertia, going from, again, a little over 6,500 up to about almost 8,000. And you see these data points fall right in line with the other data points that we had in our study. So this gave us confidence that the swing speed we were getting from the players wasn't unique or in some way biased because these were ugly bats or bats that we had brought ourselves, but that they were being swung at the same speed that they would be swinging the regular bats. And this is really focusing on swing speed, not hit ball performance. Clearly, if they brought in their own bat, they would likely get a higher batted ball speed because that would be a higher performing bat than the ones we had in our field study. Now, one of the things that people will often say, or I guess sometimes say, is that it's not really appropriate to be using a 98 mile an hour performance limit for fast pitch play. That's a speed that is perhaps too fast for this game. I prepared this plot to describe what a 98 mile an hour bat means for fast pitch softball. So when we have a 98 mile an hour bat, that is based on the assumption of a slow pitch male batter who has a fast swing speed of around 85 miles an hour and a relatively slow pitch speed of around 25 miles an hour. Here what I've done, based on the data from our field study, is I've modified that swing speed formula to have a swing speed that is appropriate for the age of the batters. So the swing speed for these ages is taken directly from our field study. And then we used a pitch speed that we found from data that we've taken by tracking games. And we see that at the very highest level of play, here at the college level where their ability seems to plateau out, a 90 or what we call a 98 mile an hour bat would actually be performing at around 74 miles an hour, or that's the batted ball speed you might expect. Where if you go down to the other end of the spectrum, if you have a 10-year-old batter who is swinging what we call a 98 mile an hour bat, their batted ball speed would likely be at most around 40 miles an hour in play. So that shows how having one performance limit allows you to have a wide range of different speeds in play that would be determined by the different batter's ability. So that's where we're at right now with our field studies in Fastpitch. And here's the next steps that we need to undertake. First of all, we need to take this data and digest that down and develop a swing speed formula that we would use for the Fastpitch game. We need to then, once we have that swing speed formula, establish a performance limit that would likely be different from the 98 miles an hour. And third, and perhaps most importantly, we need to select a fast pitch test ball. There's interest, or at least consideration right now, for looking at different types of test balls for the fast pitch game. So we need to determine what that ball will be and the type of ball we'll use in the test, because that will affect the performance of the bats that we test. Next, I'm going to summarize the field studies, or the tournaments that we've been tracking in this past year. So we tracked the Women's College World Series in Oklahoma at the end of May. We tracked also the Men's Fast Pitch at the beginning of August, and the Men's Modified Tournament at the end of August. So I've got one slide for each of these tournaments that we tracked, and they have a similar format. So for the Women's College World Series, we tracked 4 games, just over 1,200 pitches, a little over 100 hits. We had an average batted ball speed of almost 60 miles an hour. If you looked at the top 10, it was the average of the top 10 hits was 78, and the absolute fastest batted ball speed was 83 miles an hour. The average pitch speed was 63 miles an hour. This is a histogram showing those speeds, and you see that nearly all of the pitches fall between the 60 to 70 mile an hour range, where the batted ball speed has a much larger distribution. That would be expected depending on the quality of the hit. The average hit distance was 122 feet, and again, this is the distribution for the distances for these 4 games that we were able to track. We also recorded 4 home runs for the games that we tracked. So for these games, we had on average about 1 home run per game. This is the summary for the Men's Fast Pitch tournament that we tracked. Here we tracked 9 games, almost 2,000 pitches, about 140 hits. The average batted ball speed was just about 65 miles an hour. The top 10 average was 86, and the absolute highest batted ball speed we recorded was 92 miles an hour. This is the histogram for the pitch speeds, ranging between about 65 and 75 miles an hour, a little faster than we saw for the women's game. The average pitch speed was then 69 miles an hour. This is a histogram for the batted ball speed, ranging up to just over 90 miles an hour. Below is the histogram for the hit distance. The average hit distance was 149 feet. And for these 9 games, we recorded 6 home runs, so a little less than 1 home run per game. Next, we tracked a men's modified tournament. Here we tracked 15 games, almost 4,000 pitches, and almost 1,000 hits, about 750 hits that we were able to track. The average batted ball speed was about 69 miles an hour. The average from the top 10 was 91, and the absolute fastest batted ball speed that we tracked was 95 miles an hour. Pitch speeds here are considerably lower, about 46 miles an hour. That's in comparison to slow pitch softball that's around 25 miles an hour. Notice also that the range in pitch speeds is quite a bit higher than both fast pitch games or tournaments that we were tracking, ranging from about 35 to 55 miles per hour. Here is the batted ball speed histogram. You see a little less distribution here than you saw in the fast pitch games. One would expect that the players have a little better opportunity to get contact with the ball, so you'd expect a little tighter grouping of the batted ball speed data. The average hit distance was 157 feet. Here's the distribution of those distances. And we tracked 38 home runs over 15 games, so a little more than 2 home runs per game for this tournament. Okay, I'll switch topics now. This is an area that has garnered more interest recently. Manufacturers have come up with a new design of bats that I've termed nonlinear. If you look at this green line here, the green and the blue line, this is a plot of load versus displacement. So here I've taken the barrel portion of the bat and put it into what we call a load frame, and we've simply displaced or squished the barrel of the bat. So as you increase the load, or similarly as you displace the platen that's squishing the barrel, you'll get a load. And this increases in a nonlinear way, but you more or less get a smooth curve that comes up for both of these bats. For this new category of bats that describes here, I've got three examples, the Xeno, the Z2000, and Flipper bat. These bats, as you load them, show a similar smooth curve as you increase the load, but then at an abrupt point in this loading, you'll see the slope of these lines change here. So this is a response that's new and one that we haven't seen before. What's happening is manufacturers are designing their bats in a way where there are things inside the barrel that the outside of the barrel will contact at one point. So as you deform this barrel, it will initially deform freely. That's going to be this portion of the curve here. And then at some point in the deformation, this outer barrel is going to contact, in this case, these discs that are inside the barrel. That stiffens the barrel, and then that changes the slope. That causes this slope to change. And different manufacturers have different concepts for doing this, but the end result is very similar. That has interesting consequences when we're trying to use barrel compression to regulate bat performance. Because for a strong hitting batter, the stiffness of these barrels is going to be out in this range here, resulting in a bat with a compliant performance. But for barrel compression, when we're using these portable testers, we're measuring that compression down here. So here we might look at this barrel compression and say, well, for this displacement, this is just too low of a force, and this would not be compliant. Where when you look at this in game conditions, it actually is compliant. And ASA has decided to adopt an exemption list where bats of this design that are approved can still pass the barrel compression test by testing that we do in the lab to ensure that they are compliant. Another thing we've been doing in our lab recently is looking at human safety. So this is a challenging thing to do in field studies because you have human subjects that really should not be injured. For a number of years, we've been working hard to develop an accurate ball model. So this is a numerical representation of a ball. It has the right weight and size of the ball, but most importantly, it loses energy in the same way a ball would upon impact. It also has a stiffness that is very similar to the ball that you would have in play. So this is work that we've been doing in our lab. What we found recently is that automotive companies have been building models of people. They'll take these models and put them in models of cars, and they'll simulate automobile crashes. And from this, they can determine whether or not their automobile has sufficient safety. Well, what we've done is taken their models of people and we've impacted them with our models of the ball. And from this, we get a pretty realistic description of what happens when a ball impacts a person. So here you can see the model has high fidelity. You have the bony structure in the scalp. You even have teeth in the jaw. You have soft tissue of the brain and the tendons that bring the body together. So we have a model here with very high fidelity that describes in great detail and accuracy the effect of a ball hitting a person. So once we have this model created, we can then look at different scenarios and try to understand what effect our rules are having on the impact force of the ball with the person. Here we looked at three balls. We looked at a very soft ball, in some cases it's referred to as a riff ball, a cork ball, which is also relatively soft, and then the ball that we're currently using in our certification testing. This is a plot of force versus displacement, and the higher the force, the stiffer the ball. So here now we have three balls that we can test experimentally. That's what these dashed lines are, and then the solid lines are our simulation describing that ball. So you can see that we're capturing this low displacement curve relatively accurately. Then we took this model of a person and we impacted the model at two locations. We impacted the model right here on this frontal bone, essentially in the middle of the forehead. This is an area of the skull where the bone is relatively thick and stiff and provides a strong platform for the ball to impact. We also considered a spot here in the temple area of the brain or of the skull. This is a part of the skull that's relatively soft and the bony structure is relatively thin. So these are two extremes to consider for a head impact. What I plotted here is the impact force as a function of initial velocity for the lateral or temporal impacts and the frontal or the impacts in the forehead. And you can see then for these balls of increasing stiffness, you have a higher impact force. So these speeds are in meters per second. This is for a presentation at an international meeting, so we had to change the units. If you double these numbers, you get roughly miles per hour. So this 44.7 is 100 miles per hour. But in each case, you see that with a stiffer ball, you have a higher impact force. And the impact forces are not that different between a lateral and a frontal impact. Now here what I'm doing is I'm plotting the stress in the bone of the skull for both the lateral and the frontal impacts. And here you see a significant difference. In the lateral side, or impacts for the temple, you have thinner bone that is damaged more easily, and that results in a much higher stress. And surprisingly, even for this very low compression ball at the lowest test speed, that would cause bone fracture. Where on the other hand, if you look at frontal impacts, you would not have bone fracture for any of these balls. So bone fracture is this black dotted line. You would not have bone fracture for any ball at low speeds. And then as you increase the test speed, you would get bone fracture. But this is an unusually high speed here at 100 miles per hour. And then these very low compression balls would not injure or cause skull fracture from the prediction of our model for any of these speeds. That doesn't mean to say, however, that a low compression ball is always better. We have found that when you get balls with unusually low compression, that they will remain deformed after they've been hit by a bat. And these become problematic to field and in some cases become lively and bounce off the ground unpredictably. So it's a balance between controlling the severity of injury and the frequency of injury, which is something we continue to work with the equipment committee. So here's a summary of our plans for 2014. We're going to continue to do bat and ball compliance testing as we've done in the past. We will continue to use the radar tracking or TrackMan to track different tournaments. We plan on doing the Women's Carls World Series, Junior Olympics, the Border Battle, and the ASA Championship Series. We're going to continue to work with ASA in developing a Fastpitch test method. We have effort underway in trying to identify tampered bats. We're looking at novel approaches and technologies that might allow us to do a better job in identifying if a bat has been tampered than we're able to do now. We're also going to continue to work on these human impact simulations. We'll be looking at different ball designs as well as impact locations. Another thing we're going to start doing this year for the first time is looking at player reaction time. This is something that others have looked at, but not very well in realistic game conditions. So our aim here is to try to replicate game conditions as accurately as we can, but then at the same time measure reaction time for these game scenarios. We'll also be working continually with Fastpitch on this new 52-300 ball to see how that ball plays both for women's fast and slow pitch.